So I guess we'll get started here. I want to welcome everybody to the Global ACM webinar on distance learning. And one of the reasons that we're here today is because the COVID crisis, it seems to be changing higher education from predominantly a face-to-face mode to an online mode, at least temporarily in the fall. Some universities have already shut down completely for the fall in terms of face-to-face, and some are going to start out face-to-face, but maybe the professors will have to jump back to online in case something goes wrong. And this is causing a lot of professors to consider new methods of teaching to fit the online mode. And this may also influence the way they teach in the face-to-face in the future, we think. So even though at Global ICM we didn't predict the COVID-19 virus, we did see about 8 years ago that in the long run, professors professionally would have to become more proficient in both the online and the face-to-face mode. And that they would have to sort of be masters of a continuum of teaching. It would take time, but this would be the trend going into the future. And so to prepare for that, we created this idea called a platform on the cloud. And this platform, which is Global ICM, combines diverse content, a variety of assessments, and technical tools for the professors to develop the appropriate and engaging kind of instruction they need for a continuum of modes from face-to-face to hybrid to fully online. Now, we were so appreciative of all of you for sending in questions in our RSVP that you would like to see answered. And so we basically have decided that we are going to organize this webinar around your questions. And we group those questions into sort of basic and advanced questions in 4 areas of query. One of them is lecture, then discussion, then content in the platform, and then grading. So Laura and David, who are going to be here today talking to us about online, they're going to basically talk into those kinds of modes. If you have more questions, then all you have to do is hover down below on the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom screen and type in your questions, and we will get to those later in the webinar. Also, at the end of this webinar, you're going to see a small screen come up, which is asking you to answer a single question, which is, Global ICM intends to have in the future, over the course of the rest of the spring and into the summer, smaller, solutions-based, and real how-to webinars in at least these 4 areas, and others that you might recommend to us and ask us to provide. So we'd really appreciate if you could respond to that follow-up question about which types of webinars you think would be most helpful. Okay, so here we are today with David Duranga of Pasadena City College and Laura Gardino of San Jose State University and Evergreen Valley College. And David and Laura, thank you very much for being available today. First of all, can you tell us just please, in about a minute or so, a bit about yourselves and your history with online teaching? And we'll start with David, if you would please. Thank you.
About 20 years ago, colleagues of mine introduced me to older Gophers and the Netscape and other information that was based on web sort of activities. And I sort of poo-pooed it, and I've been teaching for 30 years in just a face-to-face format. And eventually I thought, well, wait a minute, the way this is going, we need to use other platforms. And so I resisted for a while. I didn't quite jump in, but when I did, I began to create my own course with animations and such, my own. That was before I saw Global ICM. And when I saw Global ICM, I thought, wait a minute, Global ICM is doing the same thing I'm trying to do individually. So I jumped on in and became, I'm very much an advocate now. I have 5 or 6 sections of Global ICM every semester. And I'm also a large group instruction professor. So I teach between 80, sometimes 199 students in a semester. So Global ICM is actually very helpful on either the small scale formats that we'll teach, all of you teach, or the large scale group instruction based curriculum. So I was very proud of that experience, and I've gotten better and better at it. And now with this COVID-19 experience, and with me training and learning Zoom this last month and a half, I think together, not moving away from face-to-face is fine, and Global ICM will provide the necessary platform for me to excel and to succeed.
Laura? Oh, Laura, I think you need to unmute yourself.
I do. I should know that by now after my 80th Zoom call. My name is Laura Gardino, and I have been a freeway flyer for about 13 years now. And I started off teaching at 2 community colleges in my area as I raised my kids. And I had taken a couple of online courses for professional development, and they were super powerful and very well done. And I knew that at the community colleges, we came from a community college with a large working mom population who struggled to get to campus and were taking night classes. And I thought that this might be like an awesome avenue for them to come and still participate in college, but participate in their own time. So I started asking my department chair, hey, can we have an online class? Can we have an online class? And no one in the history department wanted to do it. And finally they threw me a bone, let me have a couple of online classes. And next thing we know, online education has exploded. I know that there's a lot of naysayers out there, but you can really build a powerful course by following some simple guidelines of interaction, responsibility on the student, and your passion and your content material. So I've been doing it for about 13 years. I do online and face-to-face colleges. Right now I'm completely online. And I'm enjoying it. And I do use Global ICM, and I also use the tools of Canvas and Zoom and a couple of other things to enrich my teaching.
Okay, great. Thank you so much to both of you. Okay, so let's go ahead with the questions. As we reviewed the questions, we could see that we had people who had this sort of one basic question: what works best for those who are not expert at this? And then more advanced questions, which I thought was a very good question here. How do we reinforce the idea that the online class is equivalent to the face-to-face class? A lot of professors are fearful that the students sort of discount the online as being somewhat inferior to the face-to-face. And they're, thinking about what are methods that we can do that make it a bit more simulative of the face-to-face. So let's start off with lectures. And I think this is really, really an important issue because the lecture is the workhorse of the face-to-face class. And of course, people are saying, wow, now I go into online, how am I going to do this? So we have a series of questions. How do I convert my face-to-face materials, particularly my lectures, to an online format? Can I use PowerPoints in an online lecture? Can I lecture with e-conferencing? And if so, how? So now this is anticipating that e-conference will be something that is quite interesting for the synchronous type of teaching, where lecture is a synchronous mode. What do you do with recordings of the lecture? And overall, how do I manage really big classes where the lecture is really, really important? So obviously any one of these questions would merit its own webinar, shall we say. But if you could sort of speak more broadly in this particular webinar to this, is knowing full well that we're going to be getting into this more later. David, let's go ahead and start. If you can kind of tackle a couple of those questions would be great.
Sure. I think that one thing to do is appreciate all the tools that are on the table as you begin to move from the face-to-face to the online format. I would go baby steps. Especially if you're a beginner, don't get overwhelmed. What I did is I did small snippets of YouTube of the highlights of each part of the content for Political Science 1, which is American government. Laura teaches like the history, I think constitutional history too. So do small snippets of it, have everything transcribed, save the YouTube files, move some of your content to the YouTube, shift from the YouTube over now, especially with the demand for e-conferencing today. You can pipe in that file on YouTube into Global ICM or Canvas, whichever platform you're more comfortable with. I'm doing both. I'm moving Global ICM videos into my Zooming conferences. I'm moving sharing screen and showing my 5-minute snippet of YouTube into the Zoom e-conference. So, but I would, I'm more advanced. Just start out, do small stuff. You can, if you're on Canvas, just go ahead and, post those small, highlights of the content that you want to get through every lecture lecture, because we're face-to-face, former face-to-face people, and then lay it out systematically on your modules at Canvas or whatever you're using, Blackboard or WebCT. I'm not sure, you know, if we're using WebCT anymore, but you want to make sure that you transition from, and I would go slow, but you know, you can certainly use all the tools that are there to help you.
Okay, great. Yeah, Laura, recently I had a conversation with a professor who had to do this spring dramatic transfer to e-conferencing. And of course, he was giving 75-minute lectures in his American government class. And I asked him, how did you use your Zoom? And he says he basically gave an e-conference lecture of the same length as he did in his face-to-face class. And I asked him, oh, did the kids stay with you? And he says, I have no idea, Pat. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit also about your experience with e-conference and, you know, what you can do in e-conference with the lecture, and what might you do in various combinations of the lecture.
I do want to add one thing about David and piggyback on what he said and then address that question. I had the pleasure of talking to David last week, and he mentioned that when he records his video lectures for the live stream, he will play his video in his Zoom conference, and then he'll stop it and like make fun of himself and add on to it, or he'll watch a historical video and stop it and then kind of question the historian or the political scientist. Like, that is a great way to use your lectures in class. Have them pre-recorded, but play the snips. I think with the transition from lecturing from your face-to-face class where you have them captive for 75 minutes to this online environment where they can turn you off, go away, do something, come back in at the end of the class and say, hey, I was here, and not really being here. You have to modify a bit for that. And the way that you modify is just like David said, you take short clips of your lecture, you play it, and then you have an engagement strategy. I use the polling feature in Global Lyceum, and there's other sites out there, but I'll talk for 5 minutes and then I'll stop and I'll ask the students a question. I'll say, okay, how are you going to engage? In Zoom, you can throw them into groups and have them tackle that question for a few minutes and then come back and share out and randomly pick a few people. But it's really taking your lecture and then stopping at about 5 to 7 minutes and having them do something. It could be something that's quick in 30 seconds, where you just ask them a true or false question, or it could be something that requires a little bit more feedback and engagement. It also depends on your lecture style. If you're a straight lecturer who doesn't have much interaction with your class, then you just give quiz questions. If you're one who really thrives off of that feedback and reads the room, you're gonna have to read the room by reading those polling questions. So it's the tidbit of, yes, you can take your lecture on there, but you have to find some way to add interaction. And that could be done before, after the quiz with a quiz question. It could be done with polling. All of a sudden I have a fly in my office. It could be done with a variety of ways.
Okay, so one of the questions in the lecture mode was, can I use PowerPoints in an online lecture? I believe that almost any platform, Global Lyceum, Canvas, Blackboard, you can upload your PowerPoint into those modes and have students read them. If you are a little nervous about the e-conferencing, or you can obviously e-conference using your PowerPoint. All of these things are possible. It's just a matter of learning a few things of how to do this. And I would say that I think the professors in the really big classes, mastering lecture mode a little bit in the e-conferencing is really going to be important for those professors. So let's go ahead and look at the next set of questions having to do with discussion. We got a lot of questions about this because of the fact that many professors are very worried about how it is that they get that real face-to-face feel of interaction and getting around the room and et cetera, et cetera. So Laura, let's go ahead and start with you and thinking about both basic professors as well as advanced professors. How would basic professors maybe do this, perhaps using a bit more of the discussion boards, and then advanced professors using more of the e-conferencing, if you could go into some of that?
One of the traditional tools of online learning is the discussion board. And the discussion board can get what you put into it. You can ask really basic textbook questions that you've regurgitated from some of your resources and get a pretty flat answer. But if you craft it to where the students really have to produce something with your material, like most of us do with our essays and compositions, but think of that on a smaller scale with the discussions, you're going to get some really rich discussions. I've also found that if you make your discussions reflective on their own personal learning, you get a lot of buy-in. Like one of my favorite questions this year, the best discussion thread I had is how would you apply the principles of this American history survey class to your major? Because not everyone's a history major, unfortunately. So they had to apply it to their own passion, and the results were phenomenal. So it's in the way that you craft these questions that you can get a lot of that discussion and that feedback and that passion that you can pick up in your face-to-face class. Another way too is in my comments. I've really become acquainted with quite a few of my online students in a way that I don't get with my face-to-face students. I mean, we chat and we joke and we have group work in my face-to-face class, but when I'm reading their papers and their reflections or their discussions, I get to comment back. I have a comment bank, so I'm not spending hours doing this and I can cut and paste, but I really get a sense of who that student is on a much more, I would even say, personal level than I would in the face-to-face class.
Okay, David.
Yeah, the advantage to these days of the Zooming e-conferencing or any e-conference you use is that you're able to, if the students are actually logging into your classroom, and that's one of the challenges we face, you're able to actually get to talk to them on a 1-to-1 basis, or maybe 5-to-1 basis, or 12-to-1 basis. It all depends how many people log in for that period of time. But if you make yourself available and you've laid down a discussion forum on Canvas, and they're not online all the time. They're synchronous instruction, so they're not dealing with the questions you're asking all together at one moment. But with the Zooming or with e-conference, they're there, and then you can have a real rigorous discussion on some of the questions that poli-sci is dealing with right now, especially with the Trump presidency and some of the challenges with the whole impeachment process and all this reaction to the pandemic and whatnot. So if you tailor your discussion questions so that it's also in poli-sci or history more important to current events, or maybe historical seminal events that have occurred in our history, perhaps you'll get a better response as well. But man, the e-conferencing is really deepening, I think, the experience for the discussion boards.
Okay, great. So I think we're going to kind of take that discussion set of questions sort of into the next thing, which is about the actual content, because it's a natural fit for active learning to go together with groups, to go together now with this Zoom e-conferencing, because you can use these breakout sessions, okay, which you've alluded to, but we haven't really talked about. Now that, the whole thing of using all these three pieces together with the breakout, that requires a whole webinar, okay? And if people are interested, it's very easy to set one of these up in Zoom. It's really more an issue of how to handle it. Let's go ahead and, Laura, I'm gonna start with you on this one, because I know that you've done some breakout conferencing, and also this, how to use sort of active learning problems, because you might be doing a bit less lecturing and then a bit more e-conferencing. So go ahead, Laura, and speak to these issues about the content and the e-conferencing and the groupings.
So one of my favorite things about Zoom has been the fact that I can break out into breakout rooms. Google Meets does not have this, which is unfortunate, but I'm sure Google will catch up rather quickly with all the pressure this pandemic has put on it. But I use primary source problems, and Global Lyceum has a primary source problem where it gives them some sources, very briefed, very chunked, like, hey, let's look at this source. And then I have a directed question. And then I'm able to put my students in those breakout rooms and say, okay, here is your problem on the Rodney King riots. You and your group must go and find one, commonality in the sources that I have provided you between the liberal and the conservative perspectives. So they'll go into into their groups. They'll be working out the problem in real time. They can turn in the assignment in Canvas or in Global Lyceum as a group. So I'm less grading things. I'm only going to grade 10 assignments in my class of 30 instead of 30 assignments. So I will give them the prompt. We'll start off with a introduction of the source. I will put them into breakout rooms. They have a specific question to answer in their breakout rooms. What I love about Zoom is they can raise their hand and say, hey, can you come into our group and talk to us? So I can pop into their individual group. We can discuss the source. And then I go back. After I've given them a set amount of time, then they come back to large group and we have a discussion. And I tell everyone like, hey, if you are in a group of 3, I have the right to call on your group and someone has to answer me. So it kind of takes that pressure off of, I don't want to talk, but I've given you all the tools and someone in that group will generally step up. And then we do that like 2 or 3 times in my synchronous meeting on Zoom, where I'll send them back with a task to their small groups. And then at the end of the session, we can do a 5-minute debrief. Most of them have got it. They turn it in. I have 10 assignments to grade and I can see if they have really, achieved what I wanted them to out of the discussion. What I found, my last comment, what I found with the online discussions is that I'm really having to determine what I want from it, whereas I was kind of getting lazy with that in my face-to-face classes. Like I knew how my discussions should have run and I didn't have any measurable things to say, hey, this is what I wanted them to achieve. The online teaching really kind of says, hey, what do I really want them to get out of this? And then at the end, I have proof whether they got what I wanted them to from the session or not.
David?
Yeah, this is a whole, it's going to become a newer and more enriched area because of the Zoom conferencing. For me, remember I had a large group instruction courses. So one of the things that Zoom can do is have the breakout rooms. And I think I haven't deployed that yet, but I'm going to, and I have that large setting in fall. It looks like Pasadena City College has moved into pure online. So we're not going to be face-to-face for a while, probably till next spring, which is just the way a lot of community colleges are going to head toward. Cal States are certainly going to be pure online now. So this is our future and we have to master it. Just keep in mind that you're not going to know it all at one shot. Because of the size of my courses, I didn't specialize in having a lot of breakout rooms or discussion activities, but I can see the merit in it. And as my courses get smaller, next fall, I'm going to deploy the breakout rooms and I'll set it up so that they have, we start every discussion with a breakout room and a question and raised, and then they can talk to me, however many participants are there. So I'm new at this too, so I'm willing. An old dog can learn new tricks. So.
Okay. So
I think it's having the quality material too. Like you set up and you have your stuff. And I mean, I think that's an advantage that we sometimes get with Global Lyceum is they have these nice little problems, activities that you have to solve. And it might not be Global Lyceum, it might be something else, but you want to make sure you have a chunk of material that you can use that's going to develop a really good question.
Yeah, with the groups, you always have to have very scaffolded material. That's key in active learning. But I want to kind of delve a bit more here. I want to concentrate a little bit more on the big classroom. Okay, the professors who have 120, we have some with 200. Okay, imagining how e-conferencing might do. I personally think that the professors with the big classes are going to have to master the e-conferencing a bit more, kind of tackle it a bit more, try harder on that element. But what would a lecture look like? I kind of imagine a 20-minute lecture. A professor who had a large class asked me, and I said, you can do breakout rooms, or you can basically set up smaller classes, like break up your class into 30 student classes and possibly have 45-minute sections instead of hour and 15-minute sections or something like that. I mean, I don't know. What are things that you might recommend, Laura?
I used to teach a 90-student section history course, and I would actually cancel class for a week and meet with them in small group sections. And that was, so I was still fulfilling my time. I just canceled the traditional, like, meet all at the same time, thing. And then I would meet with them in small groups, just like you said, for 20 minutes. And we would talk about their paper. So they all had to come with their thesis statement, the argument they were going to make, and the evidence they were going to use. And we were able to hash that out in very intimate settings. So I think that with online teaching and those large lecture classes, you have the chance to look at it very non-traditional. You get the chance to break it up how you want to. I was talking to one of my colleagues the other day, and he was making videos that he had them watch, and they couldn't come into the class until they had taken the video quiz. And he didn't even police this. He just made that his expectation. So maybe kids weren't taking the quiz and coming into the lecture, but when they had come into the lecture, they had a knowledge of what they were going to talk about, and he had already given part of his lecture, and then he was able to like feed upon some of the questions in the class, just in the comments, and take that and run with it and to expand upon the background that they already had. So it's just kind of finding your style and then figuring out a small baby step to take to transfer that to the online environment. I think the new motto is going to be go slow. Get one thing really good, and the other stuff will start to fall in line.
David?
Yeah, keep in mind, I've evolved. I mean, I've moved from the traditional face-to-face with 199 students. So what I tend to do is it's like roll ham 101. So a lot of the professors that have the large classes, you're going to have to find a way to do that, to engage the student in some manner, either through a whole group and do it like a humorous, vignette, whatever, and bring them in, show a part of a film, show something that's fun, bring in, I call them Dumbo, bring in Trump, bring in the Congress, bring in history, bring in Washington, bring in the experience of slavery, something that is intriguing to them, bring them in. Use your voice, even if you can't move too much, and I'm very much theatrical. This laptop thing is like talking head, stiff, I can't move. So you're gonna have to find a way to engage the student, even if it's a large group, or if you want to break it into, you could do that. You could break it if there's 2 days of the class, you can have half the class meet on Monday, half the class meet on Wednesday, and that's fine. But if you want to be able to, break them into meeting, small breakout groups and do a particular question, then bring back together and talk to you. For the moment, what I'm doing is I start off bringing in Global Lyceum and what their assignments are for this week. But I've been learning Zoom, so I'm just in the process myself of learning, mastering e-conferencing. But I brought in YouTube, 5-minute snips. I brought in PBS, the Frontline series on Obama and the presidency to engage them. We don't watch the whole thing. We simply bring it in, and I ask them to do a small little, either an extra credit project or a small little, answer this question, and they have to submit it to Canvas. Canvas is my touchstone. With Canvas, all the activities, all your introductions, all your discussion boards, because of accreditation pressures, you're going to have to submit everything through Canvas anyway. And that's a challenge for us on the Global Lyceum front, because if we're having them read stuff on Global Lyceum, accreditation teams are really interested in the student-to-student interaction, faculty-student interaction, but on Canvas. And so that's a trick for us. We're going to try to find a way to, do both satisfy our informational quest and readings on Global Lyceum, and yet the accreditation teams are coming in March for Pasadena. So a lot of my stuff has to be on Canvas. So I'm trying to find a balance point. I'm hoping that the Zoom hours, Zoom time, and all the work that through Zoom the accreditation team will keep that in mind. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, with regard to, I just wanted to make sure professors don't have to go out and record all their lectures.
No.
You can actually do like a 5 to 10 minute introduction on a YouTube, okay, which is probably the best because students tend to have a short attention span, and YouTube keeps those videos short because they know the research shows that students have like about a 20-minute attention span. Okay, and you can actually put your PowerPoint with reading. I worked with a professor this semester who was like, I'm not going to record all these lectures. And I says, well, just go and do an introduction and then go ahead and put in the, like your PowerPoint images and then follow up with the slide that has the actual text of your lecture. you can actually provide your lecture notes to students and all the images that you might have had in your PowerPoint. You just hand it out there and then follow it up with the quiz, as Laura was saying. And that can be part of it. And then you can also do a 20-minute lecture with a large, with a class. You don't have to be restricted. You just have to be aware that an hour and 15-minute lecture is a tricky business. And you want to make things a bit more of an active mode in the online. Okay, so go ahead, Laura.
I also think that a lot of people are overwhelmed by that. Like, I have my lecture, I have my midterms, I have my finals, and it's thinking creatively about that. Like that little quiz that we're talking about, take those 5 questions from your midterm exam and throw them into a weekly basis and get rid of your midterm. Like quiz on a weekly basis to make sure they're attending, to make sure they're engaged with the content, and then give a final at the end, or vice versa. Like, just take what you already have and you can figure out how to tweak it. So if you have your midterm and you have your solid questions, put that at the end of one of your week's lecture instead when you talked about that material, and assess them that way. It's equally as powerful, and you actually get more students participating because it's a little bit lower stakes and they're able to take that material and do it in one sitting. So you're not having to reinvent the wheel like Pat was saying, you're just having to tweak it.
So Laura, that takes us in a nice segue into grading, okay? So, but one of the big questions for a lot of professors is they're very nervous about online testing. I just helped a professor do his final online this semester, and he was like, this was great. I should have done this years ago. A usual paper and Scantron type test, he simply put on to Global ICM with the final, and it worked beautifully. Now, the next question is, what do you do in tests to make it so that there's not this cheating? And what is the best practices for setting it up in, in your LMS or in Global ICM or whatever? Go ahead, David, why don't you take the first one?
Yes, my first experience with online instruction teaching through Global ICM was I gave one shot, one attempt for not too large of an exam, actually, 10 questions, and the students were failing. So you set it up so that all the questions are scrambled. You can create your own questions. If you have your special questions to create, you can type it in. Global SCM allows you to create your own questions. But I would probably not give any of the students the same set of exams. Any one of them they should all have different exams. And the answers should be scrambled, and the questions should be, you can refresh questions, you can create your own questions, and to make sure the integrity of the process is maintained. Smaller midterms, smaller finals, fine, but make sure that those true, false, multiple choice questions in Global ICM are refreshed, adjust. If something is unclear, clearly written, you can edit. I mean, you have all the power in the world to do what you wish to do with the Global ICM basic format of the programming. So, but you want to make sure that you don't give them the same exam with the same list of options and such. You also can put in shorter activities, writing activities, small essays, longer essays. You can do mixed exam formatting. You don't have to do just multiple choice and true false. So on any sort of quarter exam, midterm, or final. But as I think Laura is indicating, it might be better to go smaller, especially as we move toward a more pure online format for a while.
Laura?
I want to say it was a huge time saver to switch my testing to an online environment. It's instantly graded. Students get that instant feedback, and it's like, I don't have to go to the Scantron room. I don't have to do all these things that I used to have to do, and it automatically entered into my grade book. So just the saving time alone was worth it for me. But how do I set up to prevent cheating? Just like David does, I do small weekly quizzes instead of a midterm and a final. So I'm still testing what I would test in my traditional midterm and final, but they're just getting 5 to 10 to 15 questions every week. So it's very low stakes for them, and I think it actually lowers the rate of cheating because it feels very doable. If they miss a quiz, it's okay. Whereas if they miss the midterm, they're sunk in the class. So I do low weekly quizzes. They're mostly multiple choice and true false. I will do some writing activities, but I'm very specific in how I set up my quizzes. I make them 10 minutes. I give them 10 questions, so 1 minute per question. I shuffle everything. I randomize everything, so no one's getting the exact same test. They might get a few of the same questions, but not everyone has the exact same test. And I only give them one attempt. It's a small, low stakes quiz. So if they blow it, they blow it. It's not going to kill them, but it gets them to take my quizzes more seriously. If there are ways around it, there's going to be ways around cheating in the face-to-face class. There's going to be ways to cheat in the face-to-face class, just as they're on the online. But I feel like these things that I've done have really helped lower the incidence of cheating. And then I do a nice final essay at the end, because I have the luxury of having 30 to 40 students instead of David's a bajillion students. So those are some of the things that I do to help the testing process in my class.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the initial questions. I now have a series of questions that people have sent to us. One professor has said here, I'm concerned about getting the equity and quality since lots of our students are not prepared to get educated online. Families can't afford the infrastructure of the Wi-Fi services, tools and applications, et cetera. How are you dealing with inequality on where you are at? And he said in his college, they're actually starting to lend computers to students, but they're not sure how that's going to work out, even without the additional inconvenience of transitions to online. So go ahead, Laura, and address this issue as far as you're concerned.
So there's no easy answer to this question, and schools are scrambling to help our less fortunate students. But here's the other thing. If we are not kind of forcing them into this mode, they're not going to be able to compete in our modern day economy. All of our jobs now require some semblance of technology, whether it be your hairdresser or whatever. So we've got to figure out a way. They're figuring out a way to make Wi-Fi available. Like our campuses open their parking lot so students can come in and just park their car and tap into the Wi-Fi and do that, and lending computers. I don't know how exactly we address this equity question, but I do know that it's important that we don't just say, stop, we can't provide this because there's lack of equity. And then those students even fall further behind, in my opinion. So I think it's encouraging those students, making sure you have clear set policies that they can follow up, and reaching out to them when you see that they are not participating. But I don't think a lot of it's that they can't participate. They just don't have the tools, or something else comes in their life. I don't know how big the equity question actually is these days, but I teach in an urban area where Wi-Fi and stuff is pretty readily available, and our campus lends out devices.
Okay, great. I think that's going to be very important in the future. David?
Yeah, some of the students have reached out to me, and their parents had lost their job, they've lost their job, they've lost money to pay for the Wi-Fi. Their family members are now in the hospital because of COVID-19. So one of the things we have to set our established boundaries for when quizzes are due, and when we meet in class, when we Zoom, and we have to maintain our conference hours and all that. We have to be empathetic to those who are hurting. They really are. They're hurting, and the one thing you can do is they reach out and you respond. I think you need to touch base with them. And I am trying the best I can to get all these kids out of my poli-sci 1 for spring semester. And I do have due dates, but I can extend things on Global ICM. Global ICM allows you to extend based upon circumstance for your students. And so if some of the kids are trying, I got my job, I got more money now, I've got my Wi-Fi, can I catch up? Of course. Mm-hmm. Take care of them. There are people. So if you can demonstrate that, I think it'll go a long way to compressing what is financially going to be a disparity anyway. I mean, there are going to be a lot of people in Los Angeles that are not doing well, especially right now, as the students are out of work, or the parents are having trouble, or someone in the families experiencing this pressure from this virus. So
most online education, a lot of it is done via the mobile device, meaning the iPhone. The big problem is the Wi-Fi. Okay, if it's not available in your home, then you've got to go to Starbucks, but all the Starbucks are closed. Okay, so you go, and you've got to go to some other place, or you can go to the campus, but now the campus is closed. So you have to kind of problem solve with the students to find that Wi-Fi-ishness. Some places actually, cities actually have Wi-Fi available widely, but I think that I would help students problem solve where they can go. They might not know where to go to get free Wi-Fi. And maybe the campuses, there's been much discussion about the big companies making some kinds of hotspots available around areas where there are especially poor kids. And you should find out from your colleges what to do. But Laura's absolutely right. The students, it's not like this is an option. If they're going to work in the future, they're going to need to learn how to use these things. This is one of the benefits of online, is that they're actually preparing them for the world of work. So now I have another question. This one's very specific. Our administrator defines online as not meeting at a specific time, okay? And I think what she's referring here to is the campus. We notice the campuses are setting up Monday, Wednesday class at 9 o'clock, but they're making it online. Okay, so generally online classes don't have a time. You know what I'm saying? They just say, and then Laura, there's like an issue of trying to get the kids all together. Whereas now these campuses are saying Monday, Wednesday at 9 o'clock. Does that mean between 9 o'clock and 10:15 every Monday and Wednesday, the kid needs to be available? I don't know. What would you say to that, David?
That's interesting. Well, on summer classes, I have 3 pure online classes, and keep in mind, I have not taught pure online and summer, like a compressed 6-week schedule yet using Zoom. So I'm looking forward to, Zooming with the kids this summer. There is no other camp. All other classes are online. So everything is going to be like, come see, come saw. It's an interesting dilemma that has been posed here. I typically in the past have not had a scheduled, I didn't have Zoom. So I didn't schedule anything per se for an official time where all students would, have to meet. I'll probably have to on Canvas. I'll start there, and I will poll the class as a whole and see what common time we can all sort of gather together. And if there's nothing that's workable, then what we'll do is we'll set up the a Zoom conferencing office hours. In the summer schedule. It'll probably be toward the morning, but I'm also not going anywhere. So I'm fairly free. I also give my cell phone out to my students.
Me too.
So they can contact me anytime. So if you're available and make yourself available, you can do small little conferences with 3 or 4 kids anytime during the summer. And that's what they pay me to do, take care of. Polly said, there'll be 6 weeks of work through a global ICM, and they're going to have to do that work. And if they're having trouble, they'll be able to text me, and we can then Zoom. And I can, if we can find a common time, then we'll do the Zooming at that common time. But right now, I don't know that. The class has not been established quite yet, so we'll figure it out. I'll play it by ear. But I have not done this e-conferencing very long. I'm pretty new to it.
So Laura, what do you do about that thing if you're going to do breakout sessions in e-conferencing in an online class? How do you get the kids to be all in the same place at the same time? What would you do if it's not scheduled, so to speak?
Yeah. So the universities are struggling with how to put everything online very rapidly. I know at San Jose State, it's a hot mess right now that they're trying to figure out. But this is what I do. I say, hey, we're going to have 5 weeks of class or 6 weeks of class for the summer. I'm making these 2 dates each week available. You must attend to. Like, you've got to figure out a way to attend to. If there's like a terrible circumstance, let me know beforehand. But my expectation is that you don't have to attend everyone, but you're going to attend 2 of these Zoom sessions. And you can pick the topic. You can create a sign-up list like Google Forms. You can quick out it, like pick one of the ones that you're going to come, so you know your attendance. And do it that way. Like, I teach solely online, and I do 2 to 3 Zoom sessions a year for the last 3 semesters before COVID, and it wasn't a problem. I did have, out of my class of 45, probably about 5 or 6 people not come or had a time conflict. I had an alternative assignment ready for them. But overall, most of my students were able to make it. You just have to let go of expecting everyone to be there, or again, kind of be creative in how you schedule it.
Okay, so we sort of have a question here about, let me see if I catch this correctly. Okay, well, I have a few kind of almost technical questions about, I could not get YouTube videos to work on Zoom. My students could not hear the audio. So, you know, obviously Zoom technology is built into your learning management system, I believe, most of the time. You know, if you're using Zoom on your own, if your university does not have a Zoom license, okay, then you're working a Zoom free account, which it is free up to the first 40 minutes. I would assume you're going to have to go and get a little bit more technical information. We'll have Laura and David respond to that. But if you also have a problem with Zoom and it's one of the licenses on your learning management system, your university has purchased it, your eCampus should be giving you some how-tos on that. And if they're not responding, you need to, you know, make it clear. But Laura and David, Laura, go ahead and what do you do to try to get those YouTubes? Or maybe David, we'll ask him because he seems to have a lot of experience on that. Okay.
Well, I have friends of mine, remember PCC's, Pasadena City College, pretty small. So the distance ed people, I know them, just like I know Global Lyceum, all my tech people. And so I can give them a call and ask them specifically about what the student should do. And typically the student emails the, you know, distance ed people, the tech people at Pasadena City College, and they will work it out, what button has not been pushed to get the audio working. I have not had that experience with YouTube and Global Lyceum on e-conferencing at all. So if you share screen, you should be able to just pop that video right on in. And if I have to, I'll come on back to a web seminar and I will I will pop in a YouTube video for you and show you the steps to do that if I have to do that. So
Okay, well,
with audio.
We'll maybe
So,
think about it.
I gave a professional development to a couple of teachers at our school, and I was talking and I went to play this short 2-minute YouTube video. Crickets. They couldn't hear anything. It was awful. It was on Google Meets. I was so embarrassed because I was supposed to be this tech person. And your answer is Google it. Like, Google can't hear audio on Google Meet, and a ton of solutions will pop up. If you can't solve it in the first 5 minutes, reach out to your tech person. That's the thing. And the thing about these online environments is I'm open with my students. I make mistakes all the time. I click the wrong due date. I block someone from an assignment. I forget to set the quiz up. Like, there's a lot of buttons online. Get used to a lot of buttons of clicking a lot of things, but they're all pretty patient. Like, I give my students my cell phone number too. I make very clear boundaries. I was like, you can't call me after 8 to 5 is when you can call me, but text me anytime. I won't answer until I'm ready to answer, but it's a little bit of a more give and take, and it gives the quick questions I can address pretty quickly because your email volume goes up with online classes. You're getting a ton of emails. So you find tricks and tips and tricks for answering that. So Google it for the Zoom things. You can set up a few trial runs. Like, I reached out to one of my colleagues and we did a Zoom practice together just to make sure everything was working for your bigger events, or just kind of be like, hey guys, I'm trying something new today, and it might fail or it might be fantastic and you'll eventually get it right. For large lecture classes, you probably want to practice beforehand, but when you have an intimate 30 student class and you want to try something new, they're pretty darn forgiving with you.
Yeah, I was going to mention that because in conversations with professors, I said, this is actually a time to experiment because it's emergency here, you know what I mean? And students, I think, are going to be a little bit forgiving. And the other thing about online is, whereas in the classroom, you're like standing right there and you want things to work and you have an hour and 15 minutes and you're kind of like, it's like showtime. Whereas in the online environment, you go and you punch it out there and a student gets back and says, this didn't work. You have time. You know what I mean? You have time to fix it, and you have time to work out, what's going on. With our professors, we have that where they go and they set up something wrong and they go and they basically text our faculty advocate, Iris, how do I do this? And then she fixes it right there. You know what I mean? And then they go out, boom, there it goes to the students. There it is. Okay. So I think actually online can be very forgiving. I don't think that people should feel like I have to be a tech wizard. You have the excuse of the COVID-19. You say, I'm not the tech wizard. I am able to do this only because I am learning just like you. And that's what you're going to do. Now, I have another question here. I really want to understand how to administer the online multiple choice testing and have it graded without the Scantron machine. Please help me understand how to access this information. This has been my biggest issue. I converted to essay questions for exams this semester, and it was very time consuming. So let's go ahead with you, Laura. This is testing 101 kind of stuff, because the blue book tile and the multiple choice are something that you have to learn how to do. Go ahead.
So if you have your own questions, you can not easily, it does take a few hours up front to convert them to the online environment. So you can convert your pre-done test questions to Canvas, Blackboard, whatever LMS you're using. It takes you, again, it's going to take you a couple hours up front to convert those questions. But once you do, you're saved so many hours in the future of Scantrons and blue things. If you have, my first thing I would do is I'd go to the LMS that I have. If I have Canvas, I would go to Canvas. I use Global Lyceum that comes with preset questions that I can edit. Your textbook might come with pre-questions that you can edit. Use your resources. Please don't recreate the wheel. And then upload them to whatever system you're using. Global Lyceum, you have an advantage because they're already there for you and you just get to tweak. If you have your own questions, you do have to spend that initial time up front uploading them to your system, and then you can go. If you don't have easy access to your tech support person on campus, Google it, like Canvas, upload test questions, and you're going to get a variety of help that's going to walk you through the step-by-step process. If that doesn't work, then reach out to a live face and they can kind of walk you through it. But once you get them up there, you have a ton of exam options, shuffle questions, timed exams. It opens at a certain time, it closes at a certain time, it shuffles. You can do the lockdown browsers. I find them more trouble than their work, but if you're really, really concerned about testing security, those are added features that you can use. If you're really concerned, in the spring, in the fall, you can set up to have a testing service where the students pay a fee and they'll make sure that they're on camera. They have someone watching them while they're taking their test. So there's a variety of test options that are popping up. But again, I just go with low frequent quizzes that are multiple choice that kind of make sure that they're keeping up with my weekly work. And I don't think my level of cheating is that high. But then again, like in face-to-face, I was always surprised when I caught a cheater. So
I think what Tiffany's kind of getting at here is her essay questions. They were very time consuming for grading. And I think that what we need to make sure, Tiffany, is you need an easy grader, okay? An easy grader, or I think there's some other names for it, but it says digital grading. And what you do is you have comments on the right side as you're looking at the student's essay. So let's say it's like a blue book essay, it's like 3 or 4 paragraphs. You have comments on the right side, and your comments are saying not enough information, good answer, da da da, you know, and then you just drag and drop your comment over onto that writing. And you can also click right on the writing if you want something very specific, saying this example you've given about such and such isn't quite right for this, or this is an excellent example of what we're talking about. You need to learn how to use the digital grading that comes with many of the systems today. And that cuts the grading. That has been proven by research to cut the grading by 50 to 60%. Okay, so, and the students really like getting the answer back right away, because as soon as you grade it, boom, it goes in the grade book, boom, the student gets the grade, and then they see all the comments, okay? So Global Lyceum has one of these. I think there's some other companies and other people who have these, but you really, with online, you really need to get a digital grader to help you out there with that. So essentially, David, did you want to comment on that? I just want to make sure that I give it equal time here.
That was one of the biggest selling points for Global Lyceum. Global Lyceum has on the right side of the screen, now they're briefer than they once were, but when I first adopted Global Lyceum, they were fairly extensive commentary. But you can edit, create your own comments, and it's saved on Global Lyceum. You just import it over and you move it to the short or the long essay formatting that you wanted to do. So I think Laura's hit most of the points I wanted to make, and I think Global Lyceum is excellent for this, in terms of essay grading. I
do prefer Global Lyceum's Easy Grader, but Canvas does has a rubric program that you can just type in the numbers and hit the rubric, and that's it saves you a lot of time too.
That's right.
Okay. So here's another question. Should we be asking for professional development courses in the near future as part of our of our on-demand technical IT office, or should the administration be ready to fully equip us on all the technical? I'm not sure about that. Like the previous time when you mentioned about the issues with audio, and should we also compensate for time that we are adding to developing this professional? Like it, colleges are really broke right now, and I don't think they're going to pay for, additional time that you're spending on it. They're just trying to keep their colleges free, available. The entire CSU system went online for the fall, and they're probably going to drop about 10% enrollment because of this. Now, the community colleges, I'm hearing some people who are thinking that this is actually going to boost the enrollments of community colleges, because if you're going to go online, students are saying, well, I'm not going to have that great college experience. I got to stay at home. Why should I pay the big money? You know what I mean? Why don't I just take some classes from my local community college? It makes more sense. It's sort of like the kids who come from summer school, come home for the summer and take an online course or a face-to-face course in the summer school of the local community college, so they keep their record going. So I think that might be something. Laura, David, you want to comment on this?
I go, Laura? Should I?
Go for it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking that Pasadena City College will benefit initially from the the reduction in enrollment at the CSUN and Cal States. They're very expensive. The Cal States are expensive compared to PCC. So, but the challenge for us too, because some of the colleges, the city colleges, the students feel like this online stuff makes them uncomfortable too. So we could have a decline as well at the CCs. We'll have to. I mean, the best way to handle unemployment and lack of jobs is going back and getting some classes done at the community colleges. So I think we stand to benefit from it, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of drop off for us as well.
Yeah.
This is going to radically change education as we know it, and all K-12 college graduate level. It's going to be interesting. I can't even imagine what's going to turn out of that. I think online is going to be here to stay. I think that's going to skew the direction. But also San Jose State is offering us $1,000 professional development this summer to take a class to learn that, make sure that we're equipped. We actually got to buy some equipment. We had an equipment allowance to go buy. So I bought a pair of my soundproof headphones so I could do some audio work and listen to some of these Zoom calls. So it's kind of a college campus by campus basis of what your college is going to do. If you're a smaller college, your resources are going to be even more laxed. If you're a powerful CSU like San Jose State, you might have a little bit of wiggle room, but Pat's right. There's a severe economic happening to us in the near future. I think it'll take a year to catch up to us, but it's going to be pretty dark times.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is going to be of concern for adjunct professors is going to be the ability to get sections. Although we just heard from a major state university this morning that all of the face-to-face professors who teach the upper division and the graduate have declined to take the lower division really big classes, okay? The really big classes, the 180 student classes, which, in the past, the full-time professors have always, wanted those classes because you get two sections off, okay, if you teach a big class. And a lot of them are opting, no, don't want to teach it online. So now the adjuncts have it. I think in the future, those online mega classes, I think many of the universities are going to think very, very strongly after this crisis is over to possibly offer the big classes as the online, okay, and then have smaller sections. I think it's possible that they might go that way if they get some professors who really know how to do online with big classes. I think you're worth your weight in gold if you do that. If you get the kind of training for that sort of thing, that might be something that's in the future of many people. Okay, well, it's 10 o'clock now, and we've been going on, and I really, man, you guys are terrific, and I so appreciate it. We're going to try and pull out some of these questions because I don't think we answered the questions, but I really would appreciate if you could, attendees, if you could answer that single question about what is a webinar that you could really use, okay? That would be like a half an hour with I would bring in a guest, as I've done here with Dave and Laura, that specializes in that area. and actually start showing screens about what you do, not only with Global ICM, but also with Zoom, okay? And kind of really show how it's being done. I already have Laura, I'm respected. I have Laura in my mind for those breakout sessions, Laura. Okay, so doing a little training on breakout sessions. So I think that this would be a really good opportunity for you to indicate, okay, give me some more of this information. We're intending to do this over the May-June period to get people ready for the online. And also, like I said, if you'd like to go and have a 15-minute section when I introduced you to how to do Global ICM, how to do the Global ICM online and the face-to-face, because as I said, Global ICM is for a continuum of teachings, face-to-face, hybrid, online. We think good teaching is good teaching, okay? It can be done in a lot of different formats. You just have to understand the parameters and the limitations of each one, okay? So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And as I said, let's get back to some of these people with answers to their questions over the next couple of days, all right? Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.